Om Shanti. Om Shanti. Zoomers, welcome all of you who are here today. I just have to make a comment. Thank you, Narayan, for that beautiful video and guided meditation. Can I ask you, and I've asked this before on Thursday night. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Michelle, and I am your MC for today. And if you've been here before, you know who I am. I share those wonderful duties with my partner, Louise, in this. So it's a great privilege for me to be here with you and you up there in ether. But isn't planet Earth beautiful? Wow, right? I hope you keep it. It's just incredible. And the reason I bring it up, even in New York State, it's just beautiful. Last week for work, I work in New York State government. I was sent, I had to go to a conference in Lake George. It had been years since I had been there. Talk about breathtaking. You know that term breathtaking? A lot of people use that term breathtaking. It was breathtaking. I forgot how magnificent Lake George is right in our midst. So it was like exciting. Every day when I drive to the conference center, I would get out of my car and I wanted to send a picture to my family to show them, and nothing I could take with the camera could give it, oh, nothing that, no picture I took, I ended up not sending the pictures because it didn't do justice to the magnificence of what I saw. And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about. A lot of things we do is derivative. We do it through emails and we do it through pictures, but really what is the most awesome thing is what's inside of us and the planet that we live in, the things that are around us that we use other things to cloud us. And communing with nature for that, albeit short time last week, was awesome. And so too, communing with ourselves is awesome. But that's for another discussion. Maybe Sister Angelina will ask me to speak about that one time. This month is the month of May, the beautiful month of May. It is spring, and spring has sprung. It's gorgeous out. It's just great. And what's exciting, and I know I've done it in the past when I do it in December, and it was virtual. I would look out the window right now, 7 o'clock, and what was it, Jennifer? It was dark. And now it's light. It's beautiful. It's light. And it's probably going to be light when we leave here in an hour. So that too is wonderful. And we're going to talk today about our monthly discussion, which is harmony and balance. And I do believe that the world is in harmony and balance without us sometimes. Taking it out of its alignment. And it shows its, Mother Nature shows its way when she's not happy, and we see that. So we're going to talk about ourselves today in harmony and balance. And our discussion today is equity and contentment. No easy thing to talk about, equity and contentment. First, we have to decide the definitions and what it means, because at one time before I started studying here, I thought happiness was contentment. It is not. So we're going to talk about definitions and, more important, how we arrive in that place. Contentment is a miraculous place to be, but it really is sometimes elusive to us because of all that goes on around us. But tonight we have a wonderful guest speaker. Some of you may know him, Brother Tony. One thing about Brother Tony, he is deep, he is insightful, he is very, very smart, sometimes too smart for his own good and assumes that everyone knows what he's talking about. Sometimes I have to look things up when I talk to him. But what's wonderful about Tony is he is in this world, not of this world, in this world. Like me, he works, has colleagues that he's an architect, and I'll read you his bio in a minute. But he is able to take the spiritual learnings, the spiritual teachings that we get and apply it in his daily life, and so to teach us how to apply this in our life. And inevitably, whenever I listen to Tony, I'm able to pick up something and use it immediately. And that is a jewel. That is really a jewel. What's the sense of having a jewel in a jewel box if you can't show it? And Tony tonight, I know, will be giving us jewels that we can wear and show to others and make our lives filled with at least more contentment. So Tony, Antonio Figueroa, is an architect and planner in New York City and currently manages his own private practice. He has been a student of Raja Yoga meditation. Tony, is it just 20 years? I think I've been saying that for a long time. Okay, so how many years is it? I probably 24 years. Like every year I say 20 years, 20 years is 24 years. Okay, so for 24 years, and he facilitates Brahma Kumari retreats for his professional community. As I spoke of, he's able to share the spiritual knowledge with those around him in his work. And he also participates in program, again, to further the understanding of spirituality, particularly in context of a spiritual and a worldly life. And with that, I'm looking forward again. And he's been my partner in some of if you've gotten to see some of our performances at Holiday, he's sometimes my co-star. So with that, I'd love to welcome Brother Tony. Thank you so much.
Memorial Day, right? Good evening. The subject of the whole month was harmony and balance. And I was trying to think of what qualities represent harmony and balance in our lives. And what came to mind was the whole concept of equity and contentment and how they're related. So equity to me is a kind of a version of balance. But as I was talking about this session with Michelle, she kind of helped me clarify something important about equity. We talk about equity as justice, as some sort of quid pro quo, but actually equity is a spiritual concept to begin with. And it starts with altruism, which is in our existence as a society. Altruism was the first quality that made community possible, the helping of someone else selflessly, and having other people help you. That was really one of the fundamental elements of the building of the communities that now we call civilization. And when Michelle mentioned altruism, I recalled a quote from one of my favorite quotes of all time. Is from a famous Indian Swami who was probably one of the fathers of modern Hindu spirituality, which is Swami Vivekananda. And he said, and this at a conference in Chicago, he said, the atheist who helps his fellow man selflessly is closer to God than the devout person who doesn't. That to me epitomized what it was that spirituality manifested itself. Altruism. And also it was a very kind of interesting reminder, or kind of not a reminder, kind of a notification that God is not letting anybody get away who's good. He's going to catch everybody who's doing good. He's not letting anybody get away. So that atheist is not getting away. You may think they're getting away, but they're not. So that was what was brought to mind in our discussion. And so equity begins primarily as a spiritual, transcendent concept. If you're not spiritual, at least it's transcendent. It's something that's beyond our normal everyday. It's not a quid pro quo. And that's how society begins. And that's kind of the first step. Then it's really a kind of a more personal conceptual understanding of how we move through this complex world. So essentially, initially there was altruism, then there was community, and then things got more complicated. You have ambition, you have economic, social structures, particularly agriculture, that begins to create a much more rigid and demanding social environment, and you lose altruism, you lose equity. It becomes who is the most powerful person, who is the most strongest entity or strongest group. And here again, historically, we return to spirituality to deal with that imbalance, to deal with the lack of equity in society through the form of religion. Because one society is formed and there are competing groups for the economic structure, there is injustice. There is unfairness. There is lack of equity. Because justice is a term that we have to discuss separately. And what happens during this time? We have resurgence or the surgence of religion. Now, religion is a form of spirituality. And it does something very critical in the history of our civilization. First of all, during pagan Roman times, spirituality, religion manifests itself at the height of the Roman Empire, when the Emperor Constantine accedes to the authority of God, when he was crowned, when he created Constantinople. Very important moment. Here is a man who is the most powerful being in the universe of man. And he says, I will concede to the authority of God. Now, people say it was a political move, or it was a nostalgic move because his mother was a Christian. I mean, it could be many things, but it doesn't matter. Spirituality became the cornerstone of that height of that civilization, which was Constantine. And that became eventually the Christian church. So then we have the creation of Christian church, both in the East and in the West. And again, the issue of equity begins to dissipate because of power. And then the Christian church itself becomes a power center in many ways. However, during the height of the creation of all of the nations of Europe, and I'm sure there's a similar kind of situation happening all over the world, what happens? The church is able to institute the concept of universal justice, that human existence is precious, it's divine, and that it must be the cornerstone of our moral and ethical way of functioning. So again, the creation of all the nations of all of Europe was based on the creation of concept of universal justice. And the kings, realizing how powerful this concept was, said, okay, we'll take our inheritance from God. And that happened also, I'm sure, in Asia. very similar ways. So spirituality is before all of these other concepts of equity and justice. It comes first. It's not an afterthought, although in our current society, some people might think that. Certainly not you people, since you're here, but it is a very important thing to understand that equity, which to me starts with altruism, is a defining quality of our civilization. Then go through another cycle. We create all these nations. We create all these powerful institutional societal structures. And then, of course, the whole concept of equity gets subsumed into the concept of politics, concept of power. And again, we have a surgence of something that we call justice, a system. Now, justice comes into existence because we no longer have equity. People are being badly treated. Some people are being subjugated. So justice becomes a basis to kind of balance this situation. But again, justice comes from a moral, ethical base, which is basically a spiritual base. And now we live in a society where all of us have this concept of equity and justice structured into our DNA. Everybody believes in justice. Bad people believe in justice. Evil people believe in justice. Everybody believes in justice. It's in our social and psychological DNA, justice, equity. It is one of the things that gives us a sense of a place in the world, personal place in the world. So it's very important for us to understand that this concept that has come through the ages is essentially originally a spiritual concept. And if we go back to its beginnings, which is to treat your fellow man kindly, to treat them gently, to help, and in return, other people treat you the same way. If we go back to that, then we're going back to the original spiritual roots of equity, which in our society right now, everybody agrees to just, nobody says, not even the most, heinous dictator says justice is wrong, okay? Whatever they do. It's structured into our DNA right now, into our social and psychological DNA. So if we go back to the origins of the concept of equity, if we try to go deep into that process of how we came to feel that there should be equity in the world. Why should there be equity in the world? Why should a powerful person not have more justice than you do? In fact, they do, but on paper, everybody's the same. Why is it on paper that everybody's the same? Because there is a sense in our society that was imbued by spiritual values that makes us feel that this is essential, something that we all agree on. Nobody disagrees with this. Some people like to act differently, but they all on the surface have to agree. It's just the nature of our society right now, which is a vestige, a very powerful vestige of spirituality in the formation of our society, of the world that we live in. Ultimately, this equity defines us as human beings. When you see someone who treats other people well, nobody says, "Oh, that's a useless person. That person is wasting their time." Very few people really say that. People react, saying, "Okay, that's a good thing. That person is treating someone well." Even if we're not treating the person well, someone else we react. We say, that's a good thing. Something inside of us says, that's a good thing. even if we're not capable of doing it. So if we go back to look at what makes us feel that treating other people well, treating them gently, treating them sweetly, treating them fairly, why is that something that we react to? We go back to the whole underlying spiritual base of equity, altruism. And this is a segue to the whole issue of contentment, which from balance, which is the concept of equity, you have a segue into harmony, which to me, a fundamental requirement of harmony is contentment. Now, equity is a concept that all of us agree with at some level. Nobody really stands up and says, I think it's not appropriate, that equity, justice is not. Nobody says that. Just think about it. Nobody in the world says that. Everybody agrees, at least on the surface, that equity and justice are essential to our existence. So we have an objective concept of which there is general agreement. So how does that take us to contentment? If you, again, go to the basic underlying values that bring you a sense of equity in the world, you begin to touch the beginning of contentment. However, equity is an objective concept. Whatever its subjective origins, contentment is a totally subjective issue. It has nothing to do with anything objective. That is the most critical thing that we have to look at. Whereas equity is something we can think about, contentment is something that we have to feel, that we have to experience. And maybe it's appropriate at this moment to talk about the difference between contentment and happiness, because obviously they're very much related. Happiness is something that we experience. It happens. Someone does something nice for us, someone treats us well, we get some sort of a prize, we get a reward for something. We meet someone, we're engaged with someone who really like. All of these things, they make us happy. But then, if the person we really like goes away, the person that told us something nice now tells something negative, happiness doesn't tend to last indefinitely. That's really kind of the distinction between happiness and contentment, although they're very closely related. Generally, when we're happy, we feel good, we feel content. But then when something happens to take away that feeling of happiness, contentment becomes subject to it. So contentment is really something that we have to work on. Okay, we have to work. It's not like equity. Equity we live is inside, it's in our DNA. Contentment, we have to create. We have to work at it. And my own personal anecdote that I'm sure most of you have heard already, since you see a lot of familiar faces, is that when I started coming to the Brahma Kumaris and doing meditation, I was working in a very high pressure environment. Well, actually, I'm still working in a high pressure environment. But in those days, I felt that tension, having tension, pushing, pushing, insisting was a good thing. That was great. That was what really motivated people, motivated me to do things. Recently, there was an article about Ivan Boesky, the guy who's the model for the character in Wall Street. This guy called Gordon Gekko, who had the famous speech of "Greed is good." Actually, Boesky had a similar speech in some. So greed is good. So for me, tension was good. Tension was good. Got things done, got other people to do things, put pressure on people. It was good. I wasn't content. I mean, I didn't even realize I wasn't content. Then occasionally there were times when I was able to relax and I felt kind of okay. You know, when I had a vacation or I had a brief pause in all of the turbulence, and I was okay. That was kind of nice. But then my default way of being, my default condition was tension. I was always going back to tension because I thought that was how to do things. Now, fortunately, I came to the BKs a while back and I was able to get rid of that because that's not really good for your body. When you're in tension all the time, it does something very bad to your body. It makes you produce a hormone called or a chemical called adrenaline. And I was addicted to adrenaline. And it is one of the worst addictions to have because you're addicted to constantly being pushing. And you think that's good, like I did. So, and that happens to be extremely bad for your health. That means your body is constantly feeling like it's going to fight. It's going to be conflict. That's what adrenaline is for. It's for conflict. It's called a fight or flight response. It is the most powerful chemical produced by your body. And it is still the only treatment for radiation poisoning that exists. It's injecting people with adrenaline. That's how powerful it is that if you get exposed to a nuclear blast and you survive, they have to inject you with adrenaline to help you fight it. That's how powerful a drug it is that we produce, our body produces. It's the most powerful drug that exists in pharmaceuticals. We produce it, it comes from us. Okay? In case you didn't know, we're walking around with a control substance that only you can control. Can't be controlled by any legislation. So during this time that I've been meditating, I have gradually been able, well, not just meditating, going to classes, doing a lot of things involved with this organization, looking at the values and looking at the structure of how we live our lives. I've been able to change that, again, through effort. It didn't happen naturally or easily. So that I'm still dealing with turbulence. Actually, in some ways, turbulence is worse now than it was before. But now my default state is contentment. So when I go to the office, I have a crisis, I have to deal with a colleague who's not being very nice, I deal with it. Sometimes I get upset, but when I finish, I go back to being content. Before, I was always going back to being tense. It's very important. I got rid of a very bad chemical in my body, and I feel a lot more comfortable with myself and my life. So that is my own personal example. So contentment is a stage. It's not happiness per se, although it's associated, but it's a stage that you create. Happiness can sometimes happen to you. Contentment does not happen. You do it. You create it. So you have a kind of make an effort to see that these things that normally would make you unhappy, would take away your peace, your calmness, that they don't do this indefinitely. They might take it away for a small while, but you come back to yourself, to your own values, to the way you feel about yourself and about other people in the equity sense that it's important that we treat each other well, and other people treat us well. So that is the critical thing about contentment. You have to bring it back always to this kind of harmony with yourself. So some bad things happen, okay, we all have to suffer that, but you go back. As opposed to bad things happen and that becomes your attitude. It's like people, you have a relative or a friend that comes over and says something nasty to you, right? So your reaction, oh, I didn't deserve that. I mean, or you get upset, or you get angry, or worse. However, that passes. Or maybe not. Or you take that insult, that or whatever it was, and you take it and you start owning it. So then it becomes part of you. Now that person who told you whatever negative things they told you, you look at this and you say, okay, why did he or she do this? Are they crazy? I mean, are they just not stable? Was there something happening that might have warranted it? Or did I do something wrong in this? So you look at it and you say, okay, these are the things that happen. And after your anger, you go and say, okay, let me sort this out. But we don't do that. We don't say, okay, let me sort this out. No, we said, no, we were insulted. This person, my sister, my brother, my friend, said this to me. So we no longer think about why, what happened, why did it happen? No. It's me. Now it's all about me. And that's a surefire way of limiting contentment indefinitely. Because then that person said something bad to you, maybe a week ago, maybe a year ago, but you still remember it. And every time you remember the same bad thing, the same dagger that they stab you with, you took that dagger now and you're stabbing yourself every time you see them. Sometimes it goes on for a whole lifetime. Sometimes it never goes away because we want to hold that dagger that day, because our ego owns that statement that was said to us that we feel shouldn't have been said to us, and it becomes just a question of ego. That's where contentment ends. When you don't work at getting rid of these things that happen, finding out why they happen and doing what you can to undo them. But owning them, that's a really, really difficult situation to be facing, because that means that the person who insulted you has even forgotten what they said. And they come back to you and say, yeah, how are you doing? And you say, how can you be coming to me after what you did? I don't even remember what they did. But you remember. You're angry about it still. Isn't that kind of strange? This person who you thought hurt you doesn't even remember, and you are still remembering and hurting yourself. Somewhere that doesn't work out. The mathematics there doesn't add up. So that is part of contentment. You have to work on getting rid of all the things that come to you and don't leave. So contentment really means that whatever comes to you that's not positive has to leave. It doesn't mean that you become inhuman and you're not hurt, you're not you don't feel anything. No, it doesn't mean that. We're still human beings. We still are embodied beings. We're living in this body. We're living in this world. We can still be hurt physically and emotionally, but we don't take that with us forever. We have to make the effort to let these things go. It's very critical. That's where contentment begins. You have to work at it. You have to Let them go. And you have to think about what is it that it does for you. First of all, it gives you a certain level of peace. Once you get rid of all of these things, and when something good happens to you, you're prepared to receive it. You're prepared to enjoy it, to appreciate it. But if you're going around with resentment from something that happened 2 or 3 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, and something good happens to you now, you may miss it. Contentment is the stage you need to be at to really appreciate the happiness and the positive things that happen in your life. Without contentment, the happiness is, as they say in the Hindu scriptures, is the droppings of a crow. It doesn't last. But if you're content, you're able to hold on to the happiness. You're able to look at its depth and say, this was good. This was good. This was something that really made me feel better. But if you're walking around with the resentments, the happiness lasts very, very long, very short time. You barely registers. It's like when you go on vacation, I used to go on vacation and you stop thinking about work and you stop thinking about problems with colleagues, with friends and family, and all of a sudden, all these things feel, well, they're not a big deal. They're not a big deal. I'm okay here. I'm by the beach, or I'm in the country, and watching a nice mountain or lake, and I kind of feel good about this. And all of a sudden, all those things that everybody was talking about and was bothering you, they kind of go away. Then, of course, you go back to the city or you go back to where you work, and they come back. So contentment is not going back, not letting yourself go back. Always saying, this is where I live. This is the place where I live. It is really critical thing, contentment, because in addition to what it does for you, which is to give you some sense of peace and gives you the capacity to appreciate the good things that happen in the world. Although some people at this point would argue that there are not too many of those, but whatever there is, you get to appreciate it. You get to enjoy it. So that's obviously the most important thing. But secondly, and pretty close, is that if you have contentment, you can actually give that to others. Because contentment is something that you're creating. It's a quality that you're creating. And you can share that with others. It's not like equity, which is a concept that you can talk about and people can disagree. Contentment is something you feel, something you create in yourself. And because of that, it is I'm not lost for the word. It is something that you can share. It is a substance you can share. Happiness, difficult to share. Something you have on your own. Maybe you share with another person, but if contentment is something you can share with everybody, because it's something that you have created for yourself, and it's something that when people come to you and you're content, they feel better about themselves. So in addition to being important for you, it makes the people around you a lot easier to be around and makes them a lot feel better about themselves. So contentment is a really very important kind of quality to cultivate. It makes us feel better about ourselves, and it makes other people feel better because you're feeling good, you're feeling centered. So they don't come to you and say, oh, this person is, got all these issues, So this is what's the term? High maintenance. It's a high maintenance relationship. We have a high maintenance relationship with this person. You don't want anybody to have a high maintenance relationship with you. It should be a no maintenance relationship, although maybe that's not possible. But when they come to you and you're content, it makes them easy to be with you. And if they have problems, you are able to kind of let them go. So it's always a win-win. It's always a win-win. Because if you're content, someone comes with negativity, you're able to let it go. I mean, it doesn't mean you're not affected by it, but you can let it go. That affects the other person because they come back and say, wait a minute, I didn't get no more reaction. Somehow this is different. There's a change. You unbalance their negativity with your contentment. So it's very important because this is the harmony that we need to really function in this world. I mean, this is incredibly turbulent times that we're facing. And we need all the help we can get to get through them. I mean, I go back to work and I have the same situation I was facing 20 years ago. Hasn't changed fundamentally, but I have noticed that because of my demeanor, people react to me differently. I always feel that I'm very fair, that I'm very just in my assessment of people, dealing with them, and that I'm very objective. But you know, that doesn't make any difference. Because if you say something to someone in a mood in which you're saying, okay, you did something, you did this, it wasn't appropriate, you should do something else. When you say it in that mood, chances are that there's going to be resentment. But now I don't do that anymore. Or at least I try not to do it. Sometimes it happens, but now I say things, okay, let's look at how we can resolve this. That resentment doesn't happen. So consequently, people are more comfortable with you. Something that wasn't happening before. 20 years ago, there were a lot of people that were not comfortable with me, especially if they were subordinates and had to do things that I needed done. They were like, tread carefully around this guy, okay? And which means that there were things that were happening on that I didn't find out from them. I had to find out from other places. Things didn't get done the way they should have. And I thought I was a fantastic manager and I was in charge of everything. I could make every people do what they need to do. So like I said, I thought tension was good. But ultimately, those people that I was dealing with had their own dynamics and I didn't help them at all. I was just doing a task. When what we're really on this earth to do is to help each other. Like at the beginning, like at altruism, to help each other. That's what the main purpose of our being on this earth is. It's not to seek power or to seek the surrogates of power, which are money, authority, status, personal attraction, all of these things. These are the surrogates of power. That's what we're all searching after. Because we think that's going to give us something. What we really are looking for at heart is really to be content, to be centered. That really is the most critical part of the process of getting to the point that you're centered, you're balanced. That's what I consider one of the critical requirements of harmony. So the journey that we take, we have to remember, started always with a spiritual concept, spiritual value, which was altruism, which is, as far as I'm concerned, and those of you that are interested, we can have a historical context of historical discussion on it. That's how society started. It was spiritual based. It wasn't agricultural economy. It wasn't structure of societies growing and overtaking others. The original basis of society was altruism, which I consider one of the fundamental manifestations of spiritual values. We have to go back to that. We have to get back to that basis. And through that, we can begin to look at contentment as a way of functioning. Again, contentment is an effort, whereas concept of equity and altruism are things that we can think about, but the actual, when the rubber hits the road, it's contentment that we want. We want happiness too, but you want to hold on to that happiness. And that's not possible unless you have an underlying value system that permits you to appreciate it. My last statement on this is that I was working with my partner. I had a firm a long time ago. And one day we were in our cups, as they say, and we were talking about all kinds of philosophical things. And he says, in one of these moments, he says, you know, we just have to realize that justice is the invention of the devil to replace the values of cooperation, love, all of the divine virtues that spirituality promotes. And in my cups, I became sober when he says this, because it's like this kind of truth that shoots out of inebriated people's consciousness. And I said, wow. So I was like, how can he? I was like, wow, this is incredible. What a brilliant concept. And to this day, I still think that that was one of the most astute observations made about justice. It replaces our ability to love, to forgive, to understand, to accept. And it's a very, very brilliant and insidious invention, because it makes us feel okay that these people are being badly treated because there'll be justice. It's very, very insidious. That's why when he said it, I said, wow, it's like covers the entire spectrum of values in one shot. So I remember I became very sober in that minute. I'm saying, wow, he cut through the entire discussion of human values. So, and I think that's still the case. It's the invention of the devil. And we think that we invented it, that we came up with this. We didn't. What we came up with was altruism.
I have a lot to think about, Tony. Now.
You didn't know that adrenaline was a drug, right?
Excuse me?
You didn't know that adrenaline
No,
was
I
a
knew it
drug.
was a drug, but I didn't realize that's the only thing that could
The only thing
fix
is
contamination, radiation. I have to Google that. I can't
radiation
even-
sickness is still the main treatment
It's
is
true.
being
Yeah.
injected with adrenaline.
Wow, I did not know that. Wait, one sec, let's. Wow,
They take it from, probably they do it through agriculture, through animals. Yeah, like, so it's close to us. They don't take it from human beings, obviously. So yeah, take it from animals, but it's a fabrication. It's a natural fabrication. It's not artificially created. Yeah, it's still, I actually looked at that recently. It's still the one major treatment. It's not a that's not something that you want to do unless you're really sick, because adrenaline is a humongously powerful drug. It's much stronger than any opiate. For example, it's much stronger than any in heroin or cocaine or anything like that. Excuse me? I don't think they use it for cancer.
no exposure to nuclear waste or that, so, right.
No, but the radiation, when you're exposed to it, burns you. It damages tissue right away. Then over time, it does other kinds of damage. So the damage that it does to your tissue right away, that is what you do adrenaline for. Doesn't work 3 years from now when whatever radiation you were exposed to creates a cancer. That's not what it does. It deals with your tissue, to affect the effects to your body at the moment.
I had a question, and I thought it was kind of like a TED talk tonight. I liked it, especially when you came back to altruism. I think you.
But that was you. You gave me that idea. So
Well, no, but it
I
came
have to
full
give you. I have to
circle.
give you
Don't
full
give me
full
any credit.
disclosure.
No credit.
Michelle
It was a
gets
whole
the credit for
circular-
that.
Nope, it was a circular in a good way. It had a beginning, a middle, and an end. But one of the things, and I have to think about that. I like that about justice. I'm really, as a former legislator, and we talked about this
Yeah.
when I was a legislator. I used to say to people when they didn't like regulations, and it ties into justice. I said, "You created me." I said, "You want to get rid of laws? Do the right thing." I said, "The better you are as a human being and follow the golden rule, you won't need laws because you'll be inherently doing what is correct, innately correct, being kind to your neighbor. But because you do not, we have to have laws and courts, as you say." So that's exactly, we had to create this because our innate foundation of love and peace and sharing doesn't work. So if that's the case, then you need legislators to make laws. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not, steal, thou shalt not run you over and leave the scene of an accident because you're just not doing thou shalt not pilfer the society. So that ties in, I guess, with that idea of justice. And then we think we're doing the right thing.
Oh, we think we're cool.
We think we're cool. Oh, we
think we're
got
cool,
we
yeah.
got the world under,
We're-
we got it. We
Justice
did it.
is
We did it.
ours.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. But that's great. And my question is, again, let there be peace on earth and let it begin with me. How much the two words that popped out as you were speaking was self-worth, how important that is in your estimation, and also tolerance. In other words, the self-worth is yourself being full enough to take the slings and arrows that others throw at you. And so too, the tolerance to recognize that the other, he's perfect in his imperfection and I love him anyway. Can you comment on that?
Well, that was the reason I tied these two things together, because you come into contentment, or you have to come with a tool. You just can't say, okay, today I'm going to stop being content. Right. Let me look at the little video on it. So that's not
I
gonna
want
happen,
that.
Okay.
I want that pill.
That video, right? That pill. Okay. You first have to be comfortable with yourself. So equity is basically you're looking at yourself and saying, okay, am I a good person? Do I feel I am functioning in an equitable way? I won't say justice, not a just way, because justice is another concept that we are tossing around, and I think appropriately, because it's reflection of a failure of society. So am I a person who is really functioning along the lines of the original altruistic value that created civilization as we know it? So you look at that, Sam. Am I reasonable? Whatever things are happening, and it's not that you're perfect, obviously, so nobody's really that perfect, but at least you have a sense of yourself as someone that is equitable, not just fair, but equitable. You're doing the right things by yourself. You're trying to do the right things for other people. So you have to come into the whole process of contentment with some tools. I mean, you just can't. Here, obviously, we do meditation. We try to get us into the value systems that put us in the right context for that, which is part of, you do meditation, you start feeling comfortable with yourself, start feeling centered. In the spiritual meditation we do, it begins to put us in contact with the Supreme Being, and it begins to make us more stable, and which is what we promote here, obviously. So that's the beginning of it. Then contentment has to do with you're taking that value system and saying, okay, if I am content, if I am comfortable with what I am, that means I have to be comfortable with other people. You cannot say, and it will not hold in your value system to say, okay, I'm comfortable with what I am, but I really don't like that person because that person is this way, that way. Doesn't work. Then you're not equitable. Then you're not, there's no equity. You're just comfortable with what you are, with the way you are, which can be, self-fulfilling kind of cycle that you're in because you're comfortable with what you are. I'm a good person. And I also know what that means. I thought I was a fair person. It was just, I was very happy with the way, I felt very happy with the way I was because I was logical and I was very clear and very, very objective. So whatever I said, everybody had to, respond to it. And if they didn't, then they had no sense of order in their life. Okay. So the equity, you have to go in with a sense of equity, not just for yourself, sense of balance, but for everybody else. You can't say, well, I like myself, but I don't like these other people. Then you got an issue. Then you have to go in with that particular mindset. Why are they like that? Not that I don't like them, but why are they like that? What is it makes me dislike them? Generally speaking, we dislike people that have the qualities that we have that we don't like. That's kind of one of the rule of thumb. If there's someone
I
does
agree.
something you don't like,
I see
it's pretty clear that you have the same quality. Because when you don't have the same quality, you sort of say, oh, that's not really good. That's not a really good way of operating. That's not good for them. But we don't like them. We say, no, I don't like this person. That's because there's something in that person's behavior or personality that resonates with us. That means there's something about us that we don't like.
They caught us.
Yeah. So generally speaking, you have to begin to be able to accept people as they are and say, okay, this is what they are. And then if they're people that are very bad, you stay away from them. You don't get hurt from them, but you don't start judging them. You don't start saying, okay, you just, now they're people you cannot get away from. Let's be clear, because they're your relatives, they're intimately connected to you, and those people you have to develop another level of tolerance to deal with and say, okay, this is one of my tasks in life to deal with. But it has to be with a sense of, okay, if I am comfortable with myself, then I have to start looking for ways of being comfortable with other people. How do I reconcile myself to that? That was why the equity, I put the equity and the contentment as kind of a continuum.
That's great. Are there any quick questions? Because the hour's late. Yes, please. And by the way, is there anyone new here tonight? I forgot to ask. Okay, great. Welcome back. I'm sorry. Well, the only because the Zoomers can't hear you. Okay, that's fine.
So I'm Ranja Roy. My profession is I'm a mathematician. So I started thinking a bit. So on a generic day, you might just think, oh, I'm happy by myself. But contentment is a much deeper thing in relation to the everything around me. That's what I'm trying to start to think, like that's what's coming out here. Because contentment seems to me a higher level of happiness or something like that, right? Like it's easier to say, oh, I'm happy today, but it's harder to say I'm content today.
Much harder.
Much harder,
Much harder.
much harder.
It requires work.
So contentment would have so many different aspects to it. And some of the practical things that make contentment, what are they? I don't know.
Well, one comment that came in, is contentment is contagious, as you had pointed out. Happiness, as you said, and I love the way you said, I'm alone and I'm very happy. But contentment can be shared, or along that vibration of contentment, you see it roll off you. Don't you think into others that you're sharing it with others? They see, like they said, let your face be your flower that others can take.
You know how
And
they
that comes from content.
you know how they say in a relationship, we have to work on the relationship. Okay. I really don't know what that means, but it's a big psychological term. I'm working on myself. I'm working on my relationship. My son says I'm working on myself. I don't even ask him anymore because I really don't understand what he's talking about.
Well,
This is-
basically, that's what I was going to say. That's what the whole thing boils down to. Because we speak about, I agree with all the wonderful things that everybody has said, but I mean, the difficult part is what is it? What is the tool that brings us contentment? You know, and I think yoga, of course, this particular path is one of the finest ways, there's no question. And I think, you know, contentment also comes from wisdom, but maybe wisdom is the other side of the coin of contentment. Because, but I think I mean, from my own point of view, from my own personal life, it's a huge, huge effort to be content. And what you were saying about the adrenaline really hit me. That was something that was,
I'm an expert.
because so many people in this world just are adrenaline addicts. And deep down inside, they're really not content. So, you know, it's kind of like, it's like a vicious circle, you know. But again, this particular path, and as you see, your son says he's working on himself, that is absolutely special. He is talking wisdom. It means he's trying to get to that basic base within himself as to who am I? Who am I really? How do I want to be with myself? And how do I be with others? And why are others mirrors to us? Like you were saying, we're mirrors to each other, kind of karmic mirrors. So, but people have to come upon a path that's elevated than what the world shows us.
But the most important thing in this issue is that you're working on yourself, okay? Like you work on a relationship, you know. When you work on a relationship with someone else, there's compromise, there's understanding, there's acceptance, there's tolerance, all kinds of things to make the relationship work. And if you look at the catalog of things you get from the relationship specialist and from psychologists, is all these qualities, right? When you work on yourself, like my son says, still not sure what he means, is that you become tolerant of yourself, become intolerant of all your qualities. You understand them. You work on yourself by going to the point where you're saying, okay, now I know where I am at. And I'm beginning to be comfortable with myself. But that comfort with yourself has to be a comfort with yourself in the context of the rest of the universe. Not, like you said, can't be isolated, because you can be happy. Mathematics is a particularly beautiful language that you can live in it by itself. And there are people in your profession that have lived by themselves for their entire existence and never really been venturing out. So it is very necessary for you to say, okay, I live in this context. I live in this world. I live among these people. And unless I'm planning to be a hermit, I'm going to be relating to them. So you have to work to the point where your values about yourself, you're tolerant by yourself, because you can't be tolerant of anybody else if you're not tolerant about yourself. It's one of my biggest problems was I wanted everybody to go to a particular standard of behavior, and in some ways I'm still like that, but at least I have some ways of dealing with it, because I was holding myself to a standard that was maybe not appropriate.
Well, the hour is late. This was great. I thank you, and I thank you all for sharing. I'm going to switch things around and give the announcement because you'll do a quick meditation, if you don't mind. But next week, we are finishing up the month of May with our Harmony and Balance series. It's a life of blessings, and our director tonight, Brother Narayan, who's here, is going to be coming out, I think for the first time I've been here, behind the director's chair, and is going to be, he's giving me a thumbs up. He's going to be in the front chair. He's going to be in front of the camera, not behind the camera. So we're looking forward to that. And he's going to be speaking about a life of blessings. And to close it out, please stay. We're going to give you a little totally. We have a sweet for you and a blessing. And brother, would you mind doing a quick meditation to bring us home? Thank you so much. And thank you all for being here and sharing.
So now we return to ourselves. All things outside of us, our perceptions, our relationships, all of those are outside. We go into our center. Place where we live. The place where life is given to us. And the place where we work to share this life with others. Our most precious treasure, the center of our being. Om Shanti.